Let's graph some functions. Remember that we talk about functions being like a function machine? So what we're going to do is we're going to pick some ordered pairs, and that's how we're going to graph it. Now, sometimes they will give you the domain, and in this case, that's exactly what happened. Here's how I use this function machine. First I have to do is I have to set the equation up as a function of y. That means get the y by itself. So in this case right here, we would subtract 2x from both sides and get y is equal to negative 2x plus 4. That is our rule. That's the rule right there. And that is what goes inside the machine. Okay? Then this is my input. This is my domain. These are my x values. And in this case, they told us you need to use 0, 1, 2, and 3. So I take a 0. It goes into the machine in place of the x. So inside here, I'm going to do negative 2 times 0 plus 4, and out comes the answer 4. This is my range, my output, my y values. Now, what I've done here is I've kind of extended down from this because I want you to see that this function machine actually turns into an H chart. We'll get rid of those arrows here. Well, let's do this. Let's move this back out of the way for a second. Okay, let's get rid of the arrows. Move this one out. Get rid of his arrows. All right, so now we can see that we have set up an H chart. These are my x values right here. These are my y values. And now I can just use that. So when I put in a 1, I get negative 2 times 1 plus 4 is 2. When I put in a 2, I get negative 2 times 2 plus 4 is 0. And when I put in a 3, I get negative 2 times 3 plus 4, that's times 3, is negative 2. And now all I have to do is graph those. All right, so let's put these ordered pair on the graph. 0, 4, remember where we start here, in the middle at our origin. The first number tells you how far left or right to go. We don't go left or right at all. The second number, the y, tells you up or down, so up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1, 2, 2, 0, 3, negative 2. And then as we start graphing more of these, we're going to start noting that there's a pattern. I kind of see a line there. Okay? All right, let's try this one. Again, you might want to pause the video and do it. First thing you want to do is write it as a function of y, y as a function of x. So what you're going to do is subtract x from both sides. Okay, so that's going to give me negative 3y is equal to negative x minus 6. Divide everything by negative 3. And that's going to give me y is equal to 1/3 x, negative divided by negative is a positive, plus 2. So there's my function. I'm going to set up my H chart very quickly. I'm going to put the 1/3 x plus 2 in the middle. This is my y value, x values. These are my y values. My domain are my x values. So they're telling me use a negative 3, a 0, a 3, and a 6. So when I substitute in there and start working, I get 1/3 times negative 3, which is negative 1, plus 2, which is 1. I get 1/3 times 0, which is 0, plus 2, which is 2. I get 1/3 times 3, which is 1, plus 2, which gives me 3. And I get 1/3 of 6, which is 2, plus 2, which is 4. Graph these points, negative 3, 1, 0, 2, 3, 3, and 6, 4, and again, I see a line forming. Okay, let's try another one. Again, pause it, try it, graph it, check it. All right, so I'm going to set up my H chart. This time I've got x squared minus 3. My x values are -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. I really like the H charts because it gives you a place to work. I want to remind you when you're substituting in for a variable, automatically put it in parentheses, especially if you're going to be working with a calculator because that'll make a difference. -2 squared is 4, minus 3 is 1. -1 squared, that's -1 squared, minus 3 is 1 minus 3, which is -2. 0 squared minus 3 is -3. 1 squared minus 3 is -2. And 2 squared minus 3 is 1. Again, we're going to graph these. And let's see what it looks like this time. Ready? -2, 1. -1, -2, 0, -3, 1, -2, and 2, 1. Well, that's definitely not a line this time. Okay, it looks more of a U shape. Okay, all right, well, that's interesting. What's different about this compared to this equation or this equation? We'll start looking at that as we go along. Let's look at those equations. If the domain is any real number, then you can put any number you want in. Now, if they don't give you a specific domain to use, they don't say, okay, you can do that, then you can pick any number you want. So that means there's like an infinite number of possibilities of what you can get. So what we do is we connect those dots and we put little arrows on the end to say that this can go on and on forever, okay? So if they do not give us a domain, then we are just going to automatically assume that the domain is any real number. So let's go ahead and do this one. This is already set equal to y, so we get to pick whatever we want. We can make ourselves an H chart just like we did before. We know that our rule is -3x plus 2. This is my column for my x. There's my column for my y, but pick anything you want. Now, be reasonable. I try to stay close to the origin. Sometimes I'll just automatically go 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay? And that might work here. So let's find out. -3 times 0 is 0 plus 2 is 2. -3 times 1 is -3 plus 2 is -1. -3 times 2 is -6 plus 2, which is -4. And -3 times 3 is -9 plus 2, which is 7. And those are pretty reasonable and easy to graph. So now I can just go ahead and graph those on my coordinate plane. And let's see what kind of graph we get. So 0, 2, 1, -1, 2, -4, and 3, -7. All right, that's looking like a line again to me. All right, so remember, we're going to keep looking at the equations and their graphs and see if we can make some connections. All right, let's try this one. Oh, now this has the absolute value. Remember, absolute value means the distance from 0, and it has to be positive. Again, this function notation just simply took the place of y. So if that bothers you, take that out and put y in its place. It's the same thing. Okay? Let's make our H chart very quickly here. This time we're going to do the absolute value of whatever x is plus 2. This is my x, and this is my y, or my g of x. All right, and here we go. How about we pick -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Okay, All right, so that's going to give me the absolute value of negative 2 plus 2. So the absolute value of negative 2 is 2 plus 2 is 4. The absolute value of negative 1 plus 2 is 1 plus 2, which is 3. The absolute value of 0 plus 2 is 2. The absolute value of 1 plus 2 is 1 plus 2, which is 3. And the absolute value of 2 plus 2 is 2 plus 2, which is 4. Okay, so we're going to graph this one really quickly. And it's going to look like this. Okay, let's move this down here for just a minute. Move it down a little bit. Okay, ready? So here we go. Negative 2, 4. Negative 1, 3. 0, 2. 1, 3. And 2, 4. Okay, now again, I got to use whatever I wanted. So I need to connect these and put an arrow on the end. And that's pretty obvious that that shape to me looks like a V. And again, what's different about this equation compared to the other ones? Okay, again, I'm going to put my 3x minus 2 in the middle of my H chart. My x here, my y here. Pick whatever you want. How about we pick negative 1, 0, 1, 2. All right, and let's work it out. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, minus 2 is negative 5. 3 times 0 minus 2 is negative 2. 3 times 1 minus 2 is 1. And 3 times 2 minus 2 is 4. Let's graph it. Negative 1, negative 5. 0, negative 2. 1, 1. 2, 4. Okay, we got to pick whatever we want. So we need to connect these lines. Now this, when we do this, we're ensuring that we're not only getting the numbers that we picked, the values that we picked, but any other possible value, because that's what a graph is. A graph is a way to represent all the possible solutions to an equation, even though you couldn't physically write them down. Okay? All right. Here's showing us how we can use a graph. Here is the graph of the function negative 1/2 x plus 4. Now we want to use this to find the value of the function when x is negative 4. Well, where is x negative 4? Right here. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to find where this is on the graph. And there it is right there. So that point on the graph is negative 4, positive 6. So that means that when we put in a negative 4, we got a positive 6. And this is how you write this. The function when I put in a negative 4 gave me a value of 6. Okay? Not all the time can you use any number for the domain or any number for the range. So sometimes we have to look at it and say what would be reasonable. So for instance, if we're talking about time, distance, the number of objects, the number of people, things like that, we can only use positive number or non-negative values. When the domain and the range are both positive values, then instead of graphing on a whole coordinate plane, you can limit it just to quadrant 1. And that's it.